A stranger at the grocery store grabbed me and yelled, "Those are my kidnapped kids you're raising!" I froze with a box of cereal still in my hand. The woman's fingernails were digging into my forearm so hard, I felt them breaking skin through my jacket. Her face was inches from mine, and I could smell cigarettes and desperation on her breath. "What? No, these are my daughters," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was slamming against my ribs. She yanked me closer and screamed louder, "Mia, Olivia, it's Mommy! Tell this man to let you go!" My blood went cold because she just said my daughter's names, the exact names. Mia was staring at this woman with huge, confused eyes, and Olivia started crying. I tried to pull away, but the woman's other hand grabbed my cart, blocking me from moving. "I don't know who you are, but you need to let go of me right now," I said, and my voice came out shakier than I wanted. Other shoppers were closing in now, and I heard someone say they were calling the police. An older man in a baseball cap stepped between me and the woman, telling her to calm down, but she shoved past him like he wasn't even there. "Look at them!" she screamed, pointing at my daughters with a shaking finger. "That's my Mia with the blonde hair and the birthmark on her left ankle. That's my Olivia with the brown curls and the scar above her right eyebrow from when she fell off the changing table." My stomach dropped, because Mia did have a birthmark on her left ankle, and Olivia did have a tiny scar above her eyebrow that my wife Vanessa always said came from bumping into the crib when she was learning to stand. How did this stranger know these things? "Security is coming," the teenage employee announced from somewhere behind me, but the woman didn't seem to care. She was crying now, mascara running down her face in black streaks. "I reported them missing 3 years ago," she said, and her voice broke. "The police said they probably drowned in the lake, but I never believed it. I knew someone took them. I knew it." She reached toward Mia, who shrunk back in the shopping cart and started crying too. I put myself between them, my hands up like I was trying to calm a wild animal. "Listen, there's been a mistake," I said. "My wife gave birth to both of these girls. I was there. I have birth certificates and hospital records and everything." The woman laughed, but it sounded more like choking. "Your wife," she repeated, and the way she said it made my skin crawl. "Where is your wife right now?" I hesitated because Vanessa was at home. She'd been tired lately and asked me to do the grocery run alone with the girls. "She's at home," I said, and immediately regretted how defensive I sounded. "At home," the woman repeated, and she was nodding like I'd just confirmed something terrible. "And I bet she's the one who told you their names were Mia and Olivia, right? I bet she's the one who knows all about their birthmarks and scars?" Security arrived then. 2 guys in black polo shirts who looked barely older than the teenage employee. They positioned themselves on either side of the woman and asked what was happening. She whirled on them immediately. "This man kidnapped my daughters 3 years ago, and I want them back right now." One of the security guards looked at me with this expression that was half confusion and half suspicion. "Sir, are these your children?" he asked, and I wanted to scream because of course they were my children. "Yes, these are my daughters," I said, pulling out my phone. "I can show you pictures, documents, whatever you need." But the woman cut me off. "He'll have fake documents. That's what kidnappers do. They create whole new identities." The security guard held up his hand. "Ma'am, the police are on their way. Let's just wait for them to sort this out." But the woman wasn't listening anymore. She was staring at Olivia with this look of pure anguish. "She doesn't even recognize me," she whispered. "You made her forget her own mother." Mia was crying harder now, calling for me, and I wanted to just grab both girls and run. But I knew that would make me look guilty. So I stood there with my heart pounding while shoppers formed a wider circle around us, everyone recording on their phones. The police arrived within 5 minutes, 2 officers who immediately took control of the situation. They separated me from the woman, putting her with one officer near the produce section and me with another near the registers. The officer with me was younger, maybe 30, with a military haircut. He asked for my ID, and I handed it over with shaking hands. "Can you tell me what happened here?" he asked, and I explained about reaching for cereal and this woman grabbing me. I told him she somehow knew my daughter's names and details about their bodies that seemed impossible for a stranger to know. The officer wrote everything down in a small notebook, his expression neutral. "And these are your biological daughters?" he asked. "Yes," I said, then caught myself. "Well, my wife gave birth to them. I adopted them legally when we got married 4 years ago." The officer's pen paused. "So they're not biologically yours?" The way he asked made it sound like an accusation. "No, but I'm their legal father. I have all the paperwork at home." The officer nodded slowly and walked over to confer with his partner. I watched them talk to the woman, who was gesturing wildly and crying. After a few minutes, they came back together. "Sir, this woman claims these children match the description of her daughters who went missing 3 years ago from a lake house in northern Michigan," the first officer said. "She says they disappeared during a family vacation and were never found." My mouth went dry. "That's impossible. My wife had Olivia 4 years ago and Mia 6 years ago. I was there for both births." But even as I said it, doubt crept in, because I actually wasn't there for the births. Vanessa had both girls before we met. She'd been a single mom when we started dating 5 years ago, and I'd fallen in love with her and the girls as a package. I'd never questioned their origin because, Why would I? Can you prove you were there for the births? The second officer asked, and I felt like the ground was tilting under my feet. I have birth certificates at home, I said, but my voice sounded weak. The first officer exchanged a glance with his partner. Sir, we're going to need you to come down to the station so we can sort this out properly. We'll also need to contact your wife and verify the documentation. They weren't arresting me, but it felt like they were. One officer took my car keys and said they'd have someone drive my vehicle to the station. The other officer carefully lifted Mia and Olivia out of the shopping cart, and both girls screamed for me. It's okay, sweethearts, I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though I was falling apart inside. We're just going to go talk to some police officers and clear this up. But Mia was sobbing and reaching for me, and Olivia's face was turning red from crying so hard. The woman was watching all of this with tears streaming down her face, and I saw something in her expression that terrified me. She believed what she was saying. This wasn't some random crazy person. She genuinely thought these were her children. At the police station, they put me in an interview room that smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaner. The walls were beige, and there was a mirror that I knew was one-way glass. One of the officers brought me water in a paper cup, while the other one made phone calls. I tried calling Vanessa, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message trying to explain what was happening, but my words came out jumbled and panicked. 20 minutes later, a detective came in. She was older, maybe 50, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She introduced herself as Detective Patricia Nguyen and sat down across from me with a thick folder. Mr. Caldwell? She started, and I almost corrected her, but then remembered that was actually my last name now after the adoption. I need you to walk me through your relationship with Vanessa and how you came to be the father of these children. I explained meeting Vanessa at a coffee shop 5 years ago. She'd been there with both girls, and Mia had spilled juice all over my laptop. Vanessa had been so apologetic, offering to pay for repairs, and we'd ended up talking for 2 hours while the girls colored. We'd started dating a week later, and I'd moved in with them after 6 months. We got married when Olivia was 1 and Mia was 3, and I'd legally adopted both girls immediately after. Detective Nguyen wrote all of this down. And Vanessa told you she gave birth to both children? She asked. Yes, I said. She showed me their birth certificates and everything. The detective pulled out a piece of paper from her folder and slid it across the table. It was a missing persons report from 3 years ago. 2 sisters, ages 2 and 4 at the time, disappeared from a lake house in Michigan. The mother, Elizabeth Carver, reported them missing after they vanished from the beach. Extensive searches found nothing. The girls were presumed drowned. The photos attached to the report made my hands start shaking. The older girl had blonde hair and pigtails. The younger girl had brown curls. They looked exactly like Mia and Olivia. This could be a coincidence, I said, but my voice sounded hollow. Lots of kids have blonde hair and brown curls. Detective Nguyen pulled out another photo. This is a birthmark on the older girl's left ankle, she said. And here's a medical report about the younger girl's scar above her eyebrow from a fall. The room started spinning. I'd never questioned where those marks came from because Vanessa had always had explanations. The birthmark was genetic. The scar was from bumping into furniture. Normal childhood things. We need to contact your wife, Detective Nguyen said. Can you give us her work number? I gave them Vanessa's cell and her work number at the dental office where she was a hygienist. They tried both numbers and got voicemail on each. Detective Nguyen asked for our home address, and I watched her write it down with growing dread. We're sending officers to your house right now, she said. If Vanessa is there, they'll ask her to come in for questioning. The next 3 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in that interview room drinking bad coffee and replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Vanessa about the girls. She'd always been vague about their births, saying she didn't like talking about that time because she'd been alone and scared. I'd respected her privacy and never pushed. Now I was wondering what I'd missed. Detective Nguyen came back eventually with a grim expression. Your wife wasn't at home, she said. The house was empty. We did find some concerning items, though. She pulled out her phone and showed me photos. Our bedroom looked normal, except the closet was half empty. Vanessa's side of the bathroom counter was cleared out. Her laptop was gone from the desk in our home office. It looks like she left in a hurry, Detective Nguyen said, watching my reaction. Probably right after you left for the grocery store this morning. Did she seem off lately? Nervous or distracted? I thought back to the past few weeks. Vanessa had been quieter than usual, spending more time on her phone. She'd mentioned wanting to take the girls on a trip soon, just the 3 of them. I'd thought she was stressed about work. Now I was realizing she might have been planning to run. We found something else, Detective Nguyen said, pulling out an evidence bag. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 3 years ago. The headline read, 2 sisters missing from lake house, presumed drowned. The article was yellow with age and had been folded and unfolded many times. This was hidden in a box in your garage, Detective Nguyen explained, under some old tax documents. My throat closed up. Vanessa had kept a newspaper article about missing children hidden in our house. Children who looked exactly like our daughters. Children who disappeared right around the time Vanessa had supposedly given birth to Olivia. I need to see my daughters, I said, my voice coming out rough. Where are they right now? Detective Nguyen's expression softened slightly. They're with a child welfare specialist in a family room. They're safe and being cared for, But they weren't asking for me anymore, I thought. They were probably terrified and confused, wondering why strangers had taken them away from their dad. Elizabeth Carver is here too, Detective Nguyen continued. She's in another room with a social worker. She's been very cooperative and willing to do DNA testing immediately. DNA testing. That would prove everything one way or another. If these girls were really Elizabeth's missing daughters, the tests would show it. If they were really Vanessa's biological children like I'd believed for years, that would show too. How long for results? I asked. Expedited testing can give us preliminary results in 48 hours, Detective Nguyen said. Full confirmation takes about a week. 2 days of not knowing. 2 days of my daughters being kept away from me while we waited for science to prove I wasn't a kidnapper. Another detective came to the door and called Detective Nguyen out. I sat alone in the interview room staring at the photos of those missing girls, trying to find differences between them and my daughters. The hair color was the same. The facial features were similar. But lots of kids looked similar at that age, right? This didn't prove anything. When Detective Nguyen came back, she had a laptop. We pulled Vanessa's social media accounts, she said, turning the screen toward me. Look at this. The account showed Vanessa's photos going back 6 years. I scrolled through pictures of her smiling at the camera, photos of food, vacation shots, but there were no pictures of her pregnant. None of the girls as newborns. The earliest photos of Mia and Olivia showed them as toddlers, around the same age as they were when Elizabeth Carver reported them missing. This doesn't mean anything, I said, but my voice shook. Vanessa was private about her pregnancy. She didn't like posting personal stuff online. Detective Nguyen pulled up another screen. We also checked birth records. There's no hospital record of Vanessa giving birth to either child. The room went cold. What? I managed to say. Home births, Detective Nguyen said. According to the birth certificates you filed during the adoption, both girls were born at home with a midwife present. We're trying to track down this midwife now, but the phone number listed is disconnected and the address doesn't exist. Everything I thought I knew about my family was crumbling. Vanessa had lied about the births. She'd lied about the midwife. She'd kept a newspaper article about missing children hidden in our house, and now she'd disappeared, the moment someone confronted me. I need to talk to her, I said desperately. There has to be an explanation. Detective Nguyen's expression was sympathetic, but firm. We have officers looking for her now. In the meantime, we need your full cooperation with the investigation. They took my DNA sample right there, swabbing the inside of my cheek with a long cotton stick. Then they took me to a different room, where I could see Mia and Olivia through a window. Both girls were sitting at a small table with coloring books. A woman in casual clothes sat with them, talking softly. Olivia was still crying, her face splotchy and red. Mia was clutching her purple jacket and staring at the door like she was waiting for me to come get her. Can I go in? I asked. Detective Nguyen shook her head. Not until we have more clarity on the situation. If these children are kidnapping victims, we need to be very careful about their emotional state and memories. If. That word hung in the air like poison. My daughters were being treated as evidence in a crime. Children I'd raised and loved and tucked into bed every night for years were suddenly not mine to comfort. In another room down the hall, I could see Elizabeth Carver through a different window. She was sitting with a tissue box, talking to someone I couldn't see. Her hands moved frantically as she spoke, and even from this distance, I could see her desperation. What happens if the DNA matches? I asked Detective Nguyen. If these girls are Elizabeth Carver's biological daughters, they'll be returned to her custody, she said carefully, and we'll issue a warrant for Vanessa's arrest on kidnapping charges. The floor felt like it was dropping out from under me. My wife was a kidnapper. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd built a life with, had stolen children and raised them as her own, and I'd been too blind or too trusting to see it. What about me? I asked. Will I be charged with anything? Detective Nguyen was quiet for a moment. That depends on what the investigation reveals. If we determine you genuinely didn't know, you'll likely be cleared. But if we find evidence you were involved or willfully ignorant, there could be charges. I slumped against the wall, my legs barely holding me up. 48 hours ago, I'd been a normal dad planning a normal grocery trip. Now I was potentially complicit in kidnapping. Now the children I'd raised might be returned to a stranger. Now my wife was a fugitive. They let me go home that night, but with strict instructions not to leave town. A police car followed me back to our house, and I saw neighbors peering through curtains as I pulled into the driveway. The front door was still unlocked from when the police had searched earlier. Inside, the house felt wrong. Empty spaces, where Vanessa's things had been. The girl's bedroom with toys scattered across the floor from this morning when they'd been playing before we left. Mia's favorite stuffed elephant sitting on her pillow. I sat on the couch and tried calling Vanessa again. Straight to voicemail. I left another message, my voice breaking as I begged her to call me back and explain what was happening. Then I started going through the house systematically, looking for anything else she might have hidden. In the back of our bedroom closet, behind a stack of old shoeboxes, I found a lockbox I'd never seen before. It wasn't locked. Inside were documents I didn't recognize. A driver's license with Vanessa's photo but a different name, Rebecca Sinclair. A social security card with the same name, and a passport that showed Vanessa had traveled to Michigan 3 years ago, right around the time Elizabeth Carver's daughters disappeared. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the passport. Vanessa hadn't just kidnapped those children. She'd planned it carefully, traveled to find them, and created a new identity to hide what she'd done. There was also a journal in the lockbox, the cheap spiral-bound kind you could buy at any drugstore. I opened it to the first page and saw Vanessa's handwriting. The entry was dated 4 years ago. I can't have children. The doctors confirmed it today after the third miscarriage. I'm broken inside. I'll never be a mother. My throat tightened as I kept reading. Page after page of grief and rage about her infertility. Entries about seeing other women with babies and wanting to die. Entries about her boyfriend at the time leaving her because she couldn't give him kids. Then the entries changed. About 6 months before the kidnapping, Vanessa had written about finding another way. She'd started researching missing children, looking for cases where kids disappeared without clear evidence of death. She'd found Elizabeth Carver's case and become obsessed. They're out there somewhere, she'd written. Everyone thinks they drowned, but what if they didn't? What if I could save them? Give them a better life? The journal detailed her planning, watching the lake house, learning Elizabeth's schedule, waiting for the right moment when the girls would be alone on the beach. She'd approached them offering candy, something any stranger danger training would have taught them to refuse. But they were 2 and 4. They didn't know better. Vanessa had walked them to her car parked down the road and driven away before anyone noticed they were gone. I'm their mother now, she'd written that night. They belong with me. I'll give them everything Elizabeth couldn't. I threw the journal across the room and bent over, dry heaving. The woman I'd married was a monster. She'd stolen children from their mother and convinced me they were ours. For 3 years, she'd played house with someone else's daughters, while Elizabeth Carver had grieved and searched and probably blamed herself for looking away for one moment on that beach. My phone rang, and I grabbed it desperately hoping it was Vanessa. Instead, it was Detective Nguyen. We found her car, she said. Abandoned at a bus station about 60 miles from your house. We're checking security footage now. Vanessa was running. She'd left the car and gotten on a bus to somewhere, probably with the fake ID I'd just found. She'd planned for this possibility, having an escape route ready if her secret was ever discovered. There's something else, Detective Nguyen continued. We interviewed Elizabeth Carver more thoroughly. She said she'd seen a woman watching her daughters at the lake in the days before they disappeared. She reported it to local police, but they said it was probably just another vacationer. Elizabeth described the woman as having dark hair and being in her early 30s. That matches Vanessa's description from 3 years ago. It was real. All of it was real. My wife had stalked a family, stolen their children, and rebuilt them into a new family with me as the unwitting accomplice. The DNA results will take 2 days, Detective Nguyen said. But based on everything we're finding, I think you need to prepare yourself for the results. These girls are almost certainly Elizabeth's daughters. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Mia asking for bedtime stories and Olivia's laugh when I tickled her. Those were my memories with them, real moments we'd shared, but they'd been built on a foundation of lies and crime. In the morning, my phone was full of missed calls and texts. My mom demanding to know what was happening because she'd seen something on the news. My brother asking if I was okay. Co-workers from the accounting firm where I worked sending concerned messages. I ignored all of them and drove to the police station. Detective Nguyen met me in the lobby and took me to a conference room where Elizabeth Carver was already sitting. Up close, I could see the years of grief carved into her face, dark circles under her eyes, lines around her mouth that probably hadn't been there before her daughters disappeared. She looked at me with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Did you know? She asked, before Detective Nguyen could say anything. Did you know they were my daughters? Her voice was raw, like she'd been crying for days straight. No, I said, and my own voice cracked. I swear I didn't know. Vanessa told me she gave birth to them. I never questioned it. Elizabeth's face crumpled. I've been searching for 3 years, she said. Everyone told me to give up, said they were dead. But I knew. A mother knows when her babies are still alive. I wanted to say something comforting, but what could I possibly say? Sorry your children were stolen and I accidentally helped raise them? Sorry I tucked them into bed every night while you were searching and grieving? The DNA results will be ready tomorrow, Detective Nguyen said. We pushed for the fastest processing possible. Once we have confirmation, we'll start the reunification process. Elizabeth looked terrified suddenly. What if they don't remember me? They were so young when they were taken. Detective Nguyen's expression was sympathetic. We have child psychologists standing by to help with the transition. It'll be challenging, but children are resilient. Resilient. That word felt cruel when applied to kids who'd been kidnapped, had their identities erased, and would now be ripped away from the only father they could remember. I was allowed a supervised visit with the girls that afternoon. A social worker brought them into a room with toys and books scattered around. Mia ran to me immediately, wrapping her arms around my legs. Daddy, I want to go home, she said, and her voice was so small and scared, it broke something inside me. Olivia was more hesitant, hanging back near the social worker. Her eyes were red from crying, and she clutched her stuffed bunny against her chest. Can we go home now? She asked. I knelt down so I was at their level, and the social worker watched carefully from near the door. "Not yet, sweethearts," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to wait a little longer while some grown-ups figure some things out." Mia's lower lip trembled. "Where's Mommy?" she asked. The question hit me like a punch. What was I supposed to tell them? That the woman they called Mommy had stolen them from their real mother? That she was on the run from police? That everything they knew about their lives was a lie? "Mommy had to go away for a while," I said carefully. "But you're safe, and lots of people are taking care of you." We spent 30 minutes playing with blocks and reading books. The girls seemed to relax slightly, laughing when I did funny voices for the storybook characters. But when the social worker said time was up, Mia started crying again. "Don't leave us here," she begged, holding onto my shirt. "Please, Daddy, we want to come home." The social worker had to physically pry her fingers from my clothes while I stood there with tears running down my face. Olivia watched silently as they pulled me toward the door, and the look in her eyes would haunt me forever. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry. I never meant for it to happen like this. I just wanted to be a mother. Please don't let them take the girls from you. You're the only real father they've ever known." It was Vanessa. I stared at the message for a long time, my hands shaking with rage. She was sorry? She'd destroyed multiple lives because she wanted to be a mother, and now she was asking me to fight against returning stolen children to their real parent? I forwarded the message to Detective Nguyen immediately. Within an hour, she called me back. "We tracked the number to a prepaid phone purchased in Ohio. We have agents heading to that area now." But I knew they wouldn't find her. Vanessa had planned too carefully. She'd stay ahead of them as long as she could. The next morning, Detective Nguyen called me at 7 a.m. "The DNA results are back," she said. "They're a match. The girls are definitively Elizabeth Carver's biological daughters." Even though I'd been preparing for this news, hearing it confirmed felt like a physical blow. Mia and Olivia weren't my daughters. They never had been. They belonged to a woman I'd met 2 days ago in a grocery store. "Elizabeth wants to see them today," Detective Nguyen continued. "The psychologist recommends a gradual introduction, maybe starting with them in the same room playing separately, then supervised interaction, eventually working up to Elizabeth taking them home, away from me, away from the only life they remembered." I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, but nothing about this situation was fair to anyone. The first meeting happened at a child services facility with large windows and bright colors. Mia and Olivia were brought in first, and they immediately ran to me. I'd been allowed to be there for this initial meeting to help them feel safe. Elizabeth came in a few minutes later with the psychologist. She was wearing a yellow dress and holding a bag of toys. Her hands were shaking as she stood near the doorway watching her daughters play with blocks 10 feet away. "Hi, Mia," she said softly. "Hi, Olivia. Do you remember me?" Both girls looked up, confused. Mia moved closer to me and whispered, "Who is that lady?" The psychologist knelt down with them. "This is Elizabeth," she said gently. "She's someone very special who wants to get to know you." Elizabeth's face was wet with tears, but she was trying to smile. She sat down on the floor slowly and pulled a stuffed dolphin from her bag. "I brought you something," she said to Olivia. "You used to love dolphins. We went to the aquarium and you talked about them for weeks." Olivia stared at the dolphin, but didn't move. Mia whispered to me, "Daddy, I'm scared." I wanted to pick them both up and run. Instead, I said, "It's okay to feel scared, but this lady is nice. She just wants to play with you." The psychologist had explained this morning that I needed to encourage their interaction with Elizabeth, no matter how much it hurt. For the next 30 minutes, Elizabeth tried to engage with the girls while they mostly ignored her. She showed them photos on her phone of them as babies, but they didn't recognize themselves. She brought out toys she said were their favorites from before, but Mia and Olivia had no memory of them. When the session ended, Elizabeth was barely holding herself together. "They don't know me," she said to the psychologist as we were leaving. "My own daughters don't know who I am." I felt torn between sympathy for her pain and desperate fear about losing the girls. The psychologist said this was normal. Children under 5 rarely retained detailed memories from earlier years. Their brains had essentially reset during the 3 years with Vanessa and me. Elizabeth's daughters had become Mia and Olivia, with no memory of being anyone else. Over the next week, we had supervised visits every day. Gradually, the girls started warming to Elizabeth. She brought activities they enjoyed. She learned what made them laugh. She was patient when they called me Daddy and asked when they could go home. On the 5th visit, Olivia let Elizabeth hold her hand while they looked at fish in the facility's aquarium. Elizabeth started crying again, and Olivia patted her arm, saying, "It's okay, lady, don't be sad." The psychologist said this was significant progress. Meanwhile, the police still hadn't found Vanessa. She'd gone completely off the grid, likely using the fake identity documents I'd found. Detective Nguyen said they were monitoring her family and known associates, but so far, nothing. Vanessa had effectively disappeared. My life was falling apart in other ways, too. The story had hit local news, and reporters camped outside my house wanting interviews. My boss at the accounting firm put me on administrative leave until the situation was resolved. My brother called every day, but I couldn't bring myself to answer because what was I supposed to say? Neighbors who used to wave now avoided eye contact. Someone spray-painted child stealer on my garage door. I was being treated as a criminal even though I'd been cleared of any knowing participation. On the 8th day of supervised visits, the psychologist said Elizabeth was ready to take the girls for an overnight stay. Already? I asked, panic rising in my chest. They barely know her. The psychologist gave me a sympathetic look. The longer we wait, the harder the transition will be. Elizabeth has completed all the required checks, and she's set up a bedroom for them. We'll do the overnight with a social worker present, and see how it goes. I got one final visit before they left. Mia and Olivia were wearing new clothes Elizabeth had bought, and they seemed confused about what was happening. Where are we going? Mia asked. You're going to have a sleepover at Elizabeth's house, I said, my voice breaking. It'll be fun. She has lots of toys. Olivia's face crumpled. But I want to sleep at home, in my room. I looked at the psychologist, silently begging her to stop this, but she just nodded encouragement for me to continue. I know, sweetheart, I said, pulling Olivia into a hug. But right now, you need to stay with Elizabeth for a little while. I promise you're safe. Mia started crying. I don't want to go. I want you to come. The social worker gently took their hands and started walking them toward the door where Elizabeth waited. Both girls were crying and reaching back for me. Daddy! Daddy, please! Mia screamed. I stood there frozen as they were taken away, my own tears making everything blurry. The door closed, and I could still hear them crying from the hallway. That night was the worst of my life. I sat in their empty bedroom surrounded by their toys and clothes and all the evidence of the childhood I'd helped create. A childhood built on lies and crime, but real nonetheless. My phone rang at 2 a.m. It was the social worker who'd stayed with Elizabeth during the overnight. The girls are having a very difficult time, she said carefully. They're both hysterical and asking for you repeatedly. Elizabeth is doing her best, but they won't calm down. I could hear screaming in the background, Mia's voice calling Daddy over and over. Can I talk to them? I asked desperately. I'm not sure that's helpful, the social worker said. It might make the separation harder. But the screaming got louder, and I heard Elizabeth in the background saying something I couldn't make out. Then the social worker came back on. Okay, briefly, but you need to encourage them to stay with Elizabeth. Mia came on the phone sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Daddy, come get us. I don't like it here. I want to go home. My heart was being ripped from my chest. I know you're scared, baby, but Elizabeth is taking good care of you, right? I don't want Elizabeth, Mia wailed. I want you and Mommy. When is Mommy coming back? That question destroyed me because I had no answer. Vanessa was gone, probably forever, and I was being removed from their lives despite being the only parent they actually remembered. You need to be brave, I told Mia, crying so hard I could barely speak. Be brave for me and for your sister. Can you do that? Mia just cried harder, and then the social worker took the phone back. We need to go, she said. I'm sorry. They kept the girls at Elizabeth's house for 3 nights. According to the daily reports I received, they cried constantly the first night, most of the second night, and intermittently by the third. Elizabeth was patient and loving, trying everything to comfort them, but she was a stranger to them, and no amount of toys or kindness could change that fact. When they brought the girls back for our next supervised visit, both of them looked exhausted. Mia ran to me immediately, but Olivia hung back, looking confused. Did you have fun at Elizabeth's house? I asked, trying to sound positive. Olivia nodded slowly. She has a puppy, she said. A small one that licks my face. My heart sank, because that was exactly the kind of thing that would win over a 3-year-old. Elizabeth was smart, bringing in elements that would help the girls bond with her. It was the right thing for her to do, but it felt like watching my daughters being slowly taken from me piece by piece. The psychologist pulled me aside after that visit. The overnight went better than expected by the 3rd night, she said. The girls are starting to adapt. We're going to extend the next stay to 5 nights. 5 nights became a week. A week became 2 weeks. Each time they came back for our supervised visits, the girls seemed slightly more comfortable with Elizabeth and slightly less desperate for me. Olivia started calling her Lizzie instead of Elizabeth or the lady. Mia brought me drawings she'd made at Elizabeth's house of a dog and a woman with yellow hair. Lizzie says I can name the puppy, Mia told me excitedly. I want to call it Sparkles. I smiled and said that was a beautiful name, even though inside I was dying. My daughters were building a new life with their biological mother, and I was becoming a memory. Detective Nguyen called me after 6 weeks of the girls living primarily with Elizabeth. We found Vanessa, she said, in Canada. She was working at a restaurant under her false identity, but someone recognized her from the news coverage. Finally, after all this time. When will she be extradited? I asked. Probably within the week. She'll face multiple charges including kidnapping, child endangerment, and fraud. She's looking at serious prison time. Part of me felt vindicated that Vanessa would face consequences, but another part just felt hollow. Punishing her wouldn't undo the damage or give me back my daughters. The trial happened 4 months later. I had to testify about what I knew and when I knew it. Vanessa's lawyer tried to paint me as a willing participant, but the evidence I'd provided, the journal, the hidden documents, the texts, all proved I'd been deceived. Vanessa barely looked at me during my testimony, When she took the stand in her own defense, she claimed she'd saved the girls from neglectful parent. She said Elizabeth had been drinking at the lake that day, and that's why the girls had wandered off alone. She'd convinced herself she was rescuing them. The prosecution destroyed her story with evidence that Elizabeth had been completely sober and had only looked away for a moment to get sunscreen from her bag. Vanessa had stalked them for days, waiting for that exact opportunity. The jury found her guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 20 years in prison. As they led her away, Vanessa finally looked at me. "I loved them," she said. "I loved those girls more than anything." "They weren't yours to love," I said back, and that was the last time I ever spoke to her. Elizabeth was granted full custody officially after the trial. My visitation rights were reduced to once-a-month supervised visits. The psychologist said this was best for the girls' emotional stability. They needed to fully bond with Elizabeth without the confusion of having two parents. I disagreed, but I had no legal standing. I wasn't their biological father. I wasn't their adoptive father anymore, since that had been based on fraudulent documents. I was nobody to them legally. The monthly visits were torture. Each time, the girls seemed more settled with Elizabeth and less connected to me. After 6 months, Olivia started calling Elizabeth Mommy. Mia still called her Lizzie, but talked about her constantly during our visits. "Lizzie took us to the zoo," Mia would say. "Lizzie makes the best pancakes." Each story felt like a knife twisting. I was being replaced, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. My therapist said I needed to accept that the best thing for the girls was to move forward with their biological mother. Trying to maintain a presence in their lives might actually harm their development. But how was I supposed to accept losing my daughters? After a year of monthly visits, Elizabeth approached me before one of our sessions. "I've been thinking about something," she said carefully. "The girls are doing well now. They're happy and adjusted. Maybe it's time to let them move on completely." My stomach dropped. "You want to end the visits?" "I think it might be better for them," Elizabeth said, and she actually sounded sympathetic. "Every time they see you, it confuses them about who their parent is. Mia still calls you daddy sometimes, and it's confusing for her." I looked through the window where the girls were playing with blocks. They did look happy, settled, like they'd found their place in the world again. "I need to think about it," I said. That night, I sat in their old bedroom at my house that I'd never had the heart to pack up. Their stuffed animals still sat on the beds. Their books lined the shelves. I'd kept everything exactly as it was the day they were taken from me. My therapist had said this wasn't healthy, that I needed to move on, but I couldn't let go. After 2 weeks of agonizing over the decision, I called Elizabeth and told her I agreed to end the visits. "I think you're making the right choice," she said, "and I promise I'll tell them about you when they're older. I'll make sure they know you loved them and took care of them." It wasn't enough, but it was all I was going to get. The final visit was on a Saturday in April. Spring had arrived and everything felt too bright and alive for how dead I felt inside. Mia and Olivia were 6 and 4 now, growing so fast. We played in the facility's playground for an hour, and I tried to memorize every detail, the way Mia's hair flew behind her when she ran, the sound of Olivia's laugh when I pushed her on the swing. When it was time to leave, I knelt down and pulled them both into a hug. "I love you both so much," I said. "I want you to always remember that." Mia nodded against my shoulder. "We love you too, Daddy." Olivia had started calling me by my first name, Nathan, but she hugged me tight and said, "Bye, Nathan. Will we see you next month?" "We'll see," I said, unable to tell her the truth. Elizabeth came to collect them, and the girls ran to her excitedly, talking about the playground. She gave me a small nod, somewhere between sympathy and gratitude. Then they were gone. I sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour afterward, crying so hard I couldn't catch my breath. My daughters were alive and safe and happy. They'd been returned to their real mother. This was the best possible outcome given the horrible situation, but it didn't make the loss hurt any less. I'd raised those girls for 3 years. I'd been there for scraped knees and bad dreams and first days of school. I'd taught Mia how to ride a bike and helped Olivia learn her colors. Those memories were real, even if the foundation was built on lies. Driving home, I passed the grocery store where this nightmare had started. The same store where a stranger had grabbed me and yelled about kidnapped kids. I'd been so sure she was crazy that day, so convinced she was wrong. Now I understood that sometimes the truth is more horrible than you can imagine. Sometimes your whole life is a lie, and you don't realize it until a stranger in a grocery store tears everything apart. My house felt empty without the girls. I'd gotten used to the quiet over the past year, but it still hurt. I finally started packing up their room, boxing their toys and clothes to donate. I kept one stuffed animal each as a reminder, Mia's purple elephant and Olivia's bunny. They sat on my bookshelf where I could see them every day. Life moved forward because that's what life does. I went back to work and tried to rebuild my reputation. I moved to a different neighborhood where people didn't know my story. I started dating again, though I was honest about my past from the beginning. Some women couldn't handle the baggage. Others understood that sometimes terrible things happen to good people. 2 years after the final visit, I got a letter forwarded from my old address. The handwriting was childish, and my hands shook as I opened it. Dear Nathan, Mommy said I could write to you. I'm learning cursive in school now. I remember you used to read me bedtime stories. Do you still have my purple elephant? I miss him. Love, Mia. I sat down hard on my couch, reading the letter over and over. She remembered. After all this time, she still remembered me. I wrote back immediately, telling her I did still have her elephant and I'd kept it safe for her. I told her about my new job and my new apartment. I asked about school and Sparkles the puppy and what books she was reading now. Elizabeth had made good on her promise to tell them about me. And Mia had reached out on her own because some part of her still connected to the father who'd raised her during those crucial years. We started writing letters back and forth, nothing frequent, maybe every few months, but enough to maintain a connection. Olivia joined in sometimes, her letters shorter and messier but just as precious. They told me about their life with Elizabeth, and I told them about mine. It wasn't the relationship I'd imagined having with my daughters, but it was something. 3 years after that final visit, Elizabeth called me out of the blue. The girls have been asking about you more, she said. Mia especially. She wants to know if you'd be willing to have lunch sometime. No supervision, just a casual meal. My heart jumped into my throat. Really? I've been thinking about it for a while, Elizabeth continued. You were a good father to them during those years. What Vanessa did was horrible, but you loved them genuinely. I think maybe we were wrong to cut you off completely. We met at a family restaurant on a Saturday afternoon. The girls were 9 and 7 now, so much bigger than my last memories of them. Mia ran up and hugged me immediately. Nathan, you look different with the beard. Olivia was more reserved, but she smiled and let me hug her too. We ate burgers and fries and talked about everything. School and friends and the puppy, who was apparently huge now. They showed me photos on Elizabeth's phone of their life, birthday parties and vacations and ordinary moments I'd missed. It hurt seeing all I'd lost, but it also felt like a gift to be included again, even in this small way. Do you remember when I taught you to ride a bike? I asked Mia. Her face lit up. Yes, you ran behind me holding the seat, and when you let go I fell and scraped my knee. But you got right back on, I said. You were so brave. Elizabeth watched these exchanges with a complicated expression, probably wondering if letting me back in was a mistake. But when Olivia started telling me about her dance recital with genuine excitement, Elizabeth's face softened. Maybe she realized the girls had enough room in their hearts for multiple people who loved them. We started having lunch once a month, then every other week. The girls would tell me about their lives and I'd tell them about mine. It wasn't the same as raising them daily, but it was a connection, a way to stay part of their story. One afternoon, Mia asked the question I'd been dreading. Do you wish Vanessa had never taken us? I thought carefully about my answer. I wish you'd never been taken from your mom, I said. That was wrong and it hurt a lot of people. But I can't wish away the years I got to know you and love you, even if they were built on something terrible. Mia nodded slowly. Lizzie, I mean Mom. She says the same thing. She's glad we're back, but she knows those years with you were real too. That was more grace than I deserved. Elizabeth had every right to hate me, to see me as part of the crime against her. But she'd chosen to let the girls maintain a connection because it was better for them. On Mia's 10th birthday, Elizabeth invited me to the party. I almost said no because being around their whole life, their friends, and Elizabeth's family felt like it might be too much. But Mia had specifically asked for me to be there. The party was in Elizabeth's backyard with decorations and games and a dozen kids running around. Elizabeth's parents were there, and they stared at me with obvious discomfort. But Elizabeth introduced me simply as Nathan, someone very important to Mia and Olivia. I helped with the games and served cake, feeling both included and out of place. When it was time for presents, Mia opened mine last. It was the purple elephant I'd kept all these years, now cleaned and mended. Her eyes filled with tears when she pulled it from the box. You kept him, she whispered. I promised I would, I said. She hugged the elephant and then hugged me, and I heard Elizabeth's mother say something sharp to her husband. But Elizabeth put her hand on her mother's arm and shook her head. Driving home that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not quite happiness, but maybe peace. The situation was complicated and messy and would never be simple, but the girls were safe and loved. They knew their history now, both the good and the terrible parts. And somehow, despite everything, I still got to be part of their lives. Vanessa would be in prison for another 15 years. The girls knew what she'd done now. Elizabeth had told them in age-appropriate terms about how someone had taken them when they were little and kept them from their real mom. They knew I hadn't been part of that plan, that I'd been fooled too. Sometimes I wondered if Vanessa thought about us from her prison cell, if she regretted her choices or still believed she'd been saving those girls from something. I'd never know because I never wanted to speak to her again. My therapist said I'd made remarkable progress in processing the trauma. I'd lost my daughters, discovered my wife was a criminal, and had my entire life exposed and judged by strangers. But I'd survived it. More than survived, I'd found a way to maintain a relationship with the girls that worked for everyone involved. 5 years after that day in the grocery store, I was at Mia's middle school graduation. She was giving a speech about resilience and family. Family isn't always simple, she said into the microphone, her voice strong and clear. Sometimes it's complicated and messy, but what matters is that the people who love you show up, even when it's hard. She looked right at me when she said that last part, and I felt tears running down my face. Elizabeth was sitting next to me, and she reached over to squeeze my hand. "Thank you for showing up," she whispered, "even when we made it hard." After the ceremony, we took photos together. Me, Elizabeth, the girls, and even Sparkles the dog who they'd insisted on bringing. We looked like a strange, complicated family because that's exactly what we were. Not related by blood or law, but connected by shared history and love that had survived the worst possible circumstances. Olivia, who was 11 now and going through her awkward phase, looked at the photo on Elizabeth's phone. "We look weird," she said, "but like a good weird. The best kind of weird," Mia agreed. As we walked to the parking lot, Olivia slipped her hand into mine. It was such a simple gesture, but it meant everything. These girls would always carry the complexity of their story. They'd been taken and raised under false pretenses. They'd lost years with their biological mother. They'd been torn from the only father they knew, but they were also loved, fiercely loved by multiple people who'd all made mistakes or been victimized, but kept showing up for them anyway. "Nathan?" Olivia asked as we reached my car. "Yes, sweetheart? Are you going to be at my dance recital next month?" "Wouldn't miss it," I said, and I meant it. Elizabeth called out that we should all get ice cream to celebrate, and the girls cheered. I followed their car to the ice cream shop, feeling grateful for this imperfect, complicated, beautiful second chance. The stranger in the grocery store had been right that day. Those were her kidnapped kids I was raising. But she'd also been wrong because the story was so much more complex than anyone could have known in that moment. I'd lost my daughters and found a way to still be in their lives. Elizabeth had lost her daughters and gotten them back, even though they'd been changed by the experience. The girls had lost years with their real mother, but gained years with someone who'd loved them genuinely, even unknowingly participating in a crime. Appreciate you watching this far. If you enjoyed it, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story.